Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So I found this little doll on eBay. He's a really nice porcelain doll, but I kind of look at this as sort of like a doll rescue. He was being sold at a really low price, but he's much more valuable than that to me. I mean, he's a really nice doll. He's a beautiful sculpt. They took a lot of time and care into designing his feet and his hands, and he's made of porcelain. I just couldn't believe he was only $5. So today his new life starts, and this is a doll redesign. So to those of you who are new to the channel, I do make my own dolls out of polymer clay and wire, but whenever I find brown porcelain dolls, they are a must-have. Now there is a link in the description for when I did the unboxing of these dolls. Now that I've removed all the brown tape, I will need to disassemble him. So I'm removing this cotton wadding, and it appears they have a little aluminum foil, I guess, to give the shape that they wanted his body to have. But I'm giving him a total and complete makeover. Now, there's no need to be alarmed. I want anyone watching to know that he has been heavily sedated and he won't feel or remember any of this. Now, I'm just standing a little child doll next to him for scale. Yes, I definitely need to make him much taller. It made me smile when I saw the pipe cleaners under his body because early in my doll making journey, that's what I used to use. Now that he's fully disassembled, I'm going to create him a new body structure using my 18.3 gauge thermostat wire. So I twisted a few wires for the center to be his core, and then I used a single piece of wire to go all the way across to be his wingspan or his arms, and then another single piece bent in a U shape or V shape to be his legs. So I dry fitted the shoulders on top of the wire and then trimmed off a little bit of the stem so that the neck wouldn't be too long when I'm ready to attach the head. Now I need to deal with these shoes. Now the shoes are really nice, but there's a lot of hot glue and the wire left over from the stubs from the original legs. In this frame dolls, I'm just admiring his face and how beautiful the sculpt is. Now, I did not show this part in the video, but I did use my blow dryer on the hottest setting to remove some of the leftover or remnant hot glue from the shoes so that I can attach the new legs. So now I filled the shoes with new hot glue and put the wire legs in while it's still warm and allowing the hot glue to cool around the new wire legs. And dolls, I want you to take note that I check repeatedly to see if the doll can stand alone and unsupported, which is a really big deal for me. Now keep in mind this doll was not a kit. I disassembled an existing doll, so I had to do quite a few modifications to make sure things fit properly and that things were in proportion. Now when it comes to my dolls, I do have a tendency to make the arms a little bit longer than standard because I want them to be able to hug each other and to be able to carry things. Now I need to go ahead and attach his head, so I did fill it with the hot glue and stabilize it on top of the stem that I left from the core of the body. Now, although his body is pretty stable and he was able to stand alone, I do need to stabilize his hips. Now, although I don't use pipe cleaners to do my doll's core structure, they come in really handy for stabilizing the hips and building bulk to the doll to make sure they're able to stay and maintain sitting and standing positions so the legs don't flop back and forth. Now the pipe cleaners come in really handy, just adding another layer of dimension on top of the wire so that you don't have to add excess padding when you're ready to wrap the doll. Now his space structure is complete and he can stand alone and unsupported, which is so major for me. Now I wrap my dolls in 1-inch medical gauze. It's non-sterile gauze, but in his case I did add a little bit additional padding. I wanted extra padding to be around the shoulders and the arms because this is a man doll and I like my man dolls to have what I call daddy arms. So I'm building it up with a little bit of the wadding and padding right on the shoulder area and a little bit around the chest and back. Now I am securing this with hot glue because it dries really quickly. And I just gave that a couple seconds so that it could cool. And then I went on to begin to wrap the doll with the 1-inch gauze. Now pay extra attention when you're wrapping the gauze around the arm and you're trying to connect it to a part where the arm is porcelain or made of some type of clay or something, you want the transition to be smooth, to wrap it to the same level so there won't be any definition between the hard and soft part of the doll's arm. You can see here how I built up the shoulder area, but I do need to add a little bit more. To me, the extended shoulder gives his body a more masculine, strong silhouette that I think a lot of man dolls that are mass-produced are lacking. Now, after I covered that arm, I went on to complete the wrapping of the other arm so that I have that and the body all stable and solid before I begin to build up the shoulder area. I am using my tacky glue to seal off the wrap because it gives a nice smooth transition and it dries clear, not yellow. Now you see me here adding a little extra tacky glue to the shoulder and upper arm area, and I'm adding extra levels of the gauze to bulk up the upper part of the arm. And take note that with each layer, I'm adding a little bit of tacky glue and smoothing it over to make the fibers from the gauze lay down. And just like that, that is my version of daddy arms. So now it's time for me to go ahead and finish him off by wrapping his legs. Now, when it comes to the men dolls and the legs, I don't do a whole lot. Dolls, I don't do any extra padding or anything because generally men's legs aren't really big and full like that. Well, not any that I've seen anyway. So I'm just adding a little bit of the tacky glue to the wire and just wrapping it. Now, I do start with a single layer. And in general, unless I'm trying to make a heavier, stockier man, I just do 2 layers of the gauze on top of the thermostat wire. Make sure you're sealing off and finishing each layer with a little bit of the tacky glue to make sure that the fibers don't stick out and unravel. And now his body is fully wrapped and fully assembled. He is fully posable to be positioned in any way you like, and he can stand on his own unsupported without a stand. I think he's going to be much happier and really live a really great life in his new body. I've got a few more modifications to do to him to style him up, but let me sit him aside and get the ladies together. Now, when I did the haul and purchased him, I did buy 2 other lady dolls. Now, they're made a little bit different because they're by different artists. The one thing they have in common is that they're all mature-looking dolls. And she has a full torso. So I'm adding hot glue into the cavity of her torso and putting a bent piece of wire to create her legs. Now, her shoulders, head, and neck are all attached to the torso, so I don't have to connect her head, but I did add a piece of wire through her body torso, and again I'm just adding a little bit extra glue to keep everything stable. And again, I want to remind you, these dolls are not a kit. They did not come with instructions. They were sold just as parts. One set came with a head, 4 legs, and 4 hands, and the other set came with legs and hands. So I've decided this is going to be his wife, so I'm just checking her height. Her head and frame are a little bit smaller, so I wanted her height to be in proportion to what it looks like as far as the ratio for her body. After I was comfortable with her height, I went on to attach her legs the same way I did when I was making her husband, except instead of her just having shoes, she has a leg with the shoes on up to her kneecap. So I just went ahead and glued it the exact same way and allowed the hot glue to cool around the wire. And I think she's turning out really cute. I think she's such a pretty doll. Now, because she only has an upper torso, I will need to add a little bit more form and shape to her lower body. Now, I established the length of her legs, which I should have checked and cut it to the same length of her arms, but I did have to trim it off and kind of splice the wire to fit the other arm on because the hole is a little bit smaller. So I had to trim away some of the covering to the wire to add it into the cavity of her hand and wrist area. So when you're working with random doll parts, you may have to do additional modifications to make things work. And then I added a little bit of brown and black paint to her boots and allowed them both to dry. So dolls, this doll was made up from the leftover remnant parts from the other two doll boxes. And if you look closely, you can see her legs are slightly a different color from her torso and her hands. But it's okay because it's going to be covered up by her clothes and things anyway. I will need to create her some shoes. And I want you to notice the red and white wire that you see. It's actually a part of the 18.3 gauge thermostat wire, but it was too thick to go through the hole in her shoulders, so I had to thin the wire out to make it fit. So I'm just showing you dolls all of this so that you'll realize sometime you'll have to make custom modifications to build a doll. Again, these are not kits, these were spare parts. So if you ever see spare parts online or find dolls secondhand and you want to fix them up and remake them, I want you to be confident that you can do it. You can make yourself a lovely doll with some thermostat wire, pipe cleaners, and a few rolls of medical gauze. Now, when I got to her arms, in order to compensate for the lack of the third wire and the covering from a thermostat wire, I did use the pipe cleaners to wrap around her red and white wire to give her arm a little bit more bulk and dimension so that it wouldn't look odd under her clothes. Now, this is just bringing the level up so that it will match and give a smoother transition when you get to the hand area. And I just wrapped it all the way around her arm, all the way to the top up to the shoulder again, and it will help to stabilize the arm so it won't slide in and out of her shoulder torso area. And if you have to do this extra step, really take your time to make sure the wrap up to the porcelain piece is really neat and really smooth because you don't want to have an unnatural bulky part near the hand. And you can see now she can stand alone. Now I did add a little extra padding around her waist and the back of her to give her a little padding so she wouldn't be sitting on her wire. And I actually did add 2 layers of that padding in that area. Now, after I added the 2 layers of padding, I went on to wrap her just like I did the other 2 dolls, taking special care to make sure I secured the padding that I put on the back of her and to make sure there's a nice smooth transition between the wrap and the porcelain part of the legs and arms. And this is just a quick glance so you can see how it transitioned. Now, because this is a girl doll, I did make her legs and thighs a little bit thicker. So I did go around several times again to add her a little bit more softness and curve to her hip and her thigh area. She turned out lovely. Now, dolls, if you enjoyed this video today, definitely let me know in the comments. Also, like, share, and subscribe. And stay tuned for when I dress the dolls. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye-bye now, dolls.